Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lorna Nealand. I'm the Director of Engagement at the Swedish Foundation. The Foundation is a fundraising arm of Swedish, the largest nonprofit healthcare system in Washington State, based in Seattle. Thank you for completing the poll. It looks like, 41% of you are 70 and up. And then a nice mix of other ages. And thank you so much for participating. This will help inform our physicians who are here with us today. I would like to take the opportunity to thank our donors who are joining us. Without your support, we can't continue the innovative work we do every day for our patients. This is our third series of education events for women's wellness. We hope you were able to join us last month when we discussed weight, exercise, and menopause. If not, we have provided a link in the chat. We will be recording today's event. We will email you the link to the video, and this will also be uploaded to our foundation website in the coming days. This Women's Wellness Series promotes our vision for the women's wellness and specialty GYN services. An extension of Swedish, the program will provide every woman coordinated care that meets her unique needs now and in the future. We will focus on prevention, menopause, sexual health, and healthy aging. We are excited to announce the opening of the clinic will be December 13th. We will begin to offer gynecologic specialty services to address menopausal transitions and sexual health. Our minimally invasive GYN surgery clinic opened last month, and our team of specialists are eager to provide you with referrals and access to services such as urogynecology, cardiology, behavioral health, primary care, and surgical services. We will launch additional services such as wellness and educational programs over time to help address your needs as a woman. Regarding how our time together will proceed, we will be asking questions to the panelists. And this event is also meant to be informative and interactive. So please enter your questions in the Q&A at the bottom. We will answer your questions throughout the call and at the end. Also, there is an option when entering your questions into the Q&A to mark them anonymous if you prefer. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Tanja Sorensen, the Executive Medical Director for Women's Services at Swedish, to talk about this vision of this new and exciting program.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Lorna, for the introduction. Swedish aspires to become the primary destination for women's wellness and specialty GYN services, and we will be working towards coordinating care, focusing on prevention, wellness, and aging. I have to say, as we have been building this program over the last few years, it is so exciting right now to be able to say we are now actually doing this work, and we are filling out all the parts of it that we had dreamed of doing. In 2019, we gathered a dynamic group of women to share their concerns and questions about their healthcare needs as they transition into this next phase of their lives. And I'm hoping and thinking that many of you who are on here might have been at those events. The main themes we heard at that time were that women would like someone on their healthcare team who's their advocate in seeking answers and helping them coordinate their care. This would include taking a holistic approach that would include wellness, nutrition, and stress management. So in response to that, our program will provide every woman coordinated care that meets her unique needs. And in the future, we will be able to curate that care even more seamlessly and add new services that in response to your expressed needs. As Lorna mentioned, we're excited to announce that we've opened our minimally invasive GYN surgery clinic, and we are just about to open our GYN specialty services to address menopause transitions and sexual health, which you've heard about in previous webinars. Our urogynecologist will be starting in January, and as we're now able to build out services, we are happy to say that we have brain health and behavioral health services, which you're going to hear from our providers about today. One thing I'd like to say is that as we build this program, we really rely on you for support. The last few years have been rough, of course, in healthcare. We would not have been able to do what we've accomplished without your support. We're so grateful to announce a significant gift we received as seed funding for this program. And we're grateful for the additional gifts of over $1 million from a dedicated group of supporters who are helping us provide educational and outreach events such as this GYN and Women's Wellness series. So today, I think you're going to really enjoy this. You're going to be hearing from Dr. Rebecca Dunsmoor-Su, who's our medical director for our new Women's Wellness Clinic. Dr. Nancy Eisenberg, who's medical director for the Swedish Center for Healthy Aging, and Dr. Veronica Zantop, medical director for reproductive mental health and the Center for Perinatal Bonding and Support, who has graciously agreed to expand her services to our Women's Wellness Clinic. So thank you all again for joining us today, and let me turn it back to you, Lorna.
Thank you, Dr. Sorensen. I would like to welcome Dr. Rebecca Dunsmoor-Su, Dr. Nancy Eisenberg, and Dr. Veronica Zantop. You can join us with your cameras. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, everybody. Before we begin, I would like to ask each of you to tell us a bit about yourselves, your journey, current practice setting, and why did you choose to focus on women's health? And I know some of you have male patients as well, but would love to hear your perspective on treating women. Dr. Dunsmoor-Su, would you like to begin?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think many of the people on this webinar probably know me by now. They've seen me once or twice. I'm Rebecca Dunsmoor-Su. I'm the medical director for menopause and for the New Women's Wellness Clinic. And I am an OBGYN, so my focus on women's health began with residency, really. And I did a full spectrum OBGYN residency, but really in later years started to focus more and more on menopause and the menopausal transition, because I felt like that's an area where we don't necessarily get excellent training in residency. And it's something I just wanted to learn much more about and be able to do a really excellent job of caring for my patients as they entered really the second half of their lives. So I became a NAMS certified, that's North American Menopause Society, certified menopause practitioner, and really focused my practice on gynecology only and menopause specifically in 2019. And that's when I sort of started building this program with Swedish, which has been just a labor of love. And we are so excited to open next week. It's been a long time coming. I'm just really excited.
Thank you. Dr. Eisenberg, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm delighted to be here and so glad to join this women's wellness team. So I'm a cognitive neurologist and neuropsychiatrist, and I'm also boarded in lifestyle medicine. And my journey really began, gosh, when I was, a child, and when I witnessed my grandmother who died of Alzheimer's disease, and seeing her kind of lose memories, and seeing my grandfather learn to cook in his 80s. And I just knew that I wanted to be a doctor then. And as the medical director for the Center for Healthy Aging at Swedish Neuroscience Institute, and with really generous $5 million donation from JTMF Foundation, I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to work collaboratively across institutes to stand up this innovative and interprofessional women's brain health clinic, where we're putting dementia prevention science into practice when and how women want and need. And, women are disproportionately affected. 2 out of 3 people living with Alzheimer's disease are women. 2 out of 3 care partners for people with dementia are women. And we also know that communities of color are disproportionately affected as well. And so as somebody who is a cognitive neurologist and who cares deeply about health span and well-being, I focus on women to address this need.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to hearing more about the work. Dr. Zantop, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was reflecting back on my journey. I think I've always been interested in women's health. I got pregnant in residency and then developed really severe postpartum anxiety, which I'd never had, almost bordering on OCD, which is actually quite common for the postpartum. And I was a psychiatrist in psychiatry training, and I was surrounded by psychiatrists, and no one could tell me why I suddenly had these really bizarre symptoms. And it was just kind of shocking to me that, you know, in this particular area of specialty, I couldn't get the answers I needed. And so I subsequently started working at Swedish. And as you know, we deliver a lot of babies and see a lot of women who are having or dealing with big transitions in hormones and lifestyle. And so at the time, there was no mental health support for those women at Swedish at all. And so I decided that I wanted to do what I could. And with support of the OB leadership, I was able to, you know, see these women and delve into what's going on with these hormones. And it's been incredibly satisfying. I would say I've spent 15 years mostly in the perinatal realm, but have moved into kind of perimenopause, and there are a lot of similarities between the two in terms of hormones and transition and identity and things like that. So that's kind of my journey.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, I feel so lucky that we have each of you here. And to everyone watching, thank you again for being here. I think we should begin. Today, we are going to be discussing mental wellness and cognitive health. I'd love to start with a poll. So on the screen, what are you currently struggling with? Please know that there's no connection to you participating. This is anonymous, and choose up to 3. Are you currently struggling with forgetfulness, anxiety, depression, weight gain, stress, sleep disturbances, hot flashes or night sweats, or fatigue? So take a moment to take the poll. And then we'll show the results in just a moment here. What are you currently struggling with? Again, the options were forgetfulness, anxiety, depression, weight gain, stress, sleep disturbances, hot flashes, and fatigue. As you can see, the top areas are sleep disturbances, stress, and it looks like weight gain. So thank you so much for participating in that. Dr. Dunsmoor-Su, can you help us understand in general how hormone changes plays into the changes that we've seen, just like the ones in the poll?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I think, you know, one of the things that I love to educate women on about their bodies is the fact that times of hormonal transition are the times that we see the most symptoms. And it's not because of absolute values of hormones. It's not because of too much or too little. It's because of changes or deltas. When your hormones are changing and shifting and not necessarily always the same, is when our brains tend to react to that change. So like Dr. Zantop said, postpartum, when you go from very high hormone levels to very low hormone levels, we tend to see a lot of psychiatric reaction to that or cognitive reaction. Perimenopause is another one of those times where in any given month, you have very different hormones because your ovaries are still trying to put out eggs, but they're not always so successful. And those eggs are not necessarily their best. So some months you'll recruit 2 eggs and get really high estrogen levels. And some months you won't recruit any eggs and the estrogen levels are quite low. And progesterone following on that and everywhere in between. So what we tend to see is this variation in hormone that really has a huge impact on a lot of symptoms, many of them cognitive. And sleep disturbance is probably one of the biggest ones. I'm not surprised that came out first in our poll. Almost every woman I talk to is struggling with her sleep, especially during the perimenopause, but even into menopause. Of course, not really helped by the fact that our lives are so stressful during this time of life.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So Dr. Zantop, can you speak about perimenopause and menopause and the impact it has on emotional wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Dr. Dunsmoor-Su was saying about the change in hormones is really profound. I'm amazed at how much we don't know about the brain, but we're learning a lot more, and especially about women's brains. I think what we know is that estrogen has a neuroprotective and antidepressant effect on the brain. We also know that some women are very vulnerable to changes in hormones. And so those two things together, we know when hormone levels change, that can lead to mood changes and behavioral changes. And it's thought that that has to do with kind of an alteration in the way that the neurotransmitter levels and the whole neurotransmitter system works, so serotonin, which is responsible for anxiety and depression and sleep, et cetera, and that these changes are happening in different parts of the brain. So when estrogen gets withdrawn, there's changes in the amygdala, which is kind of the emotional center of the brain, and the hippocampus, which is your memory center, and the brainstem. And I'm sure Dr. Eisenberg will talk about that more. But what's also really, I think, important, the literature, kind of the perinatal literature and the menopause literature, has really focused on depression primarily. And what they found with perinatal is that, they called it postpartum depression. Actually, anxiety is much more common, and they're finding that with menopause as well, or the menopausal transition. And so it was interesting to see the respondents, the poll, that anxiety was higher than depression. And I think we frequently don't, depression, I think, is better understood. When you're depressed, you're feeling sad and you're feeling down, and, you don't have a lot of energy. Anxiety is much harder to characterize. And so I think that's why it's hard to pin down sometimes. But what we see with anxiety in women who are undergoing kind of hormonal changes is that there's more indecisiveness. There's more irritability is huge, and anger is much bigger. And you don't typically associate, I don't think, irritability or anger with anxiety, but it's definitely linked to that. And then sleep disturbances and restlessness and feeling kind of on edge, and a heightened sensitivity to external stimuli. So to sounds and to light and to emotions and to people. So that's not kind of classically anxiety, but that's what we see. And it fits within that realm. Also important to know that I think it's clear that the menopausal transition, more women suffer from depression and anxiety. And women who have a history of depression and anxiety are more likely to have an exacerbation. But interestingly, when women have kind of their onset of major depressive disorder, it frequently is either during the perinatal period or during menopause. So there's quite a high percentage of women who have their first ever episode of depression during the perimenopausal transition. And then just additionally, what I thought was interesting to know, some things that affect whether or not you're going to have mood symptoms are when you go through the transition. So if you're younger, that's a higher risk factor. Having other symptoms like vasomotor symptoms or insomnia, which then lead to anxiety and depression. And then adverse life events, and menopause, I think, or the menopausal transition comes along with a lot of other changes that women experience during that time in their life, having their kids leave home if they have kids, or having their relationship change or their job change, or I would say in society generally, where we value youth and beauty above all else, you're kind of the way that you're seen in society changes, and the way you see yourself changes. So I think that's really important to consider.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. And I just want to remind everybody that Dr. Zamtoff, that was wonderful. I just want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. So if you're taking notes and you've got a ton of questions, know that you can always refer back to this. So thank you. That was amazing. So Dr. Eisenberg, when should a woman see a specialist in brain health? And are there particular signs that we should be looking for that go beyond, they always say brain fog that we attribute to menopause?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And first of all, fewer than 5% of cases of Alzheimer's disease are early onset. And of those, 1% or less are familial. So it's low, it's very unlikely. That said, if a woman is experiencing persistent cognitive challenges that are interfering with her day-to-day functioning, then, I recommend that person be seen in our Women's Brain Health Clinic by myself and our neuropsychologist, Dr. Ariana Tart-Zelvin, for an evaluation and to see if there are other things that are contributing. But the way that I'm looking at it, and I think we would all agree, and as Dr. Sorensen mentioned earlier, women want coordinated and holistic care. And we need to expand our view of women's health, really to include brain health. And in particular, we talked about these transitions, the reproductive age, not just chronological age, but reproductive age and the menopause transition. So as members of this wellness team, we are committed together to providing timely, high quality care that's really focused on brain health promotion and dementia prevention. And if we reflect for a moment on the poll, hot flashes, insomnia, anxiety, depression, brain fog, those are all symptoms that are brain symptoms. And the transition to menopause leads to remodeling of the brain with changes in structure, and as Dr. Zantop was talking about, and function, and blood flow, and metabolism. So the brain then adapts to a new normal. And the good news with regard to dementia is that 40% of cases are preventable over a lifespan. So it's really of critical importance here that we target modifiable risk factors, and especially in midlife. And we think of Alzheimer's disease as a slow motion disease, meaning that it accumulates, the neuropathological burden accumulates over many decades and has a preclinical phase where we have an opportunity to course correct. And also it's especially critical during the menopause transition because risks of depression, as was said, and anxiety, and depression and anxiety can be neurotoxic as well, or heart disease and cardiometabolic risk and diabetes, these are all increased as well, which in turn contribute to an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. And while we know that information is not sufficient to sustain positive behavior change, I mean, if it were, nobody would smoke or eat fast food. And behavior change is really challenging, and it takes time and support to cultivate these new health promoting skills with tools and a team. So we've created a program here that I'm delighted to share that we're calling Home, where women can come home. Holistic optimism and mindful engagement. It's an evidence-based series to really address modifiable risk factors through lifestyle medicine and in close partnership, of course, with your team and in community. And the science has demonstrated that these types of visits improve health behaviors and health outcomes, the sense of self-efficacy, relationships, and quality of life.
Dr. Eisenberg, thank you very much. Again, a lot to digest there. We will be sure to share information of how to get in contact with each of our physicians on the call today, and would love to learn more. So thank you again for that information. I'd like to shift the conversation. And by the way, I forgot, there are definitely questions coming in, so please have the questions come through. We will definitely address them. But I'm going to continue this because I'd like to shift the conversation around maintaining cognitive and brain health. I know Dr. Eisenberg, actually all of you have touched on this. I'd like to do another poll. Which of the following interventions help with maintaining cognitive or brain health? Select up to 3. Reading, yoga and meditation, blood pressure management, puzzles or word games, exercise, sleep, or medications or hormones. So take a moment to answer that and select up to 3. Again, the question is, which of the following interventions help with maintaining cognitive or brain health? And once we'll look at the answers as soon as you guys are all done. All right. So 94% of you said exercise, 72% of you said sleep, 42% said yoga and meditation, and it looks like it's a pretty balance from there. Okay, so Dr. Dunsmoor-Su, are these changes permanent? Can you talk a little bit about the hormone replacement therapy? And, we hear a lot of conflicting data on HRT and the short and long-term cognitive functions.
Yeah, that's because there's a lot of conflicting data on HRT and short and long-term cognitive function, unfortunately. So when we're talking about changes and what changes occur, I think the ones that most commonly come up when I'm talking to patients who are especially in the perimenopause or the transitional time are sleep disturbances or insomnia and what they call brain fog, or what many of us call brain fog. Sometimes we talk about word searching difficulties, like it's on the tip of your tongue, you just can't pull it out. You forget a name, you're not as organized as you used to be. It feels almost like you have ADHD all of a sudden. Are these changes permanent? No, not generally, not for most women. And what we do see is that there was a nice study published, I think in 2020, that looked at actual functional imaging of the brain during that perimenopausal transition time, and then a couple of years later, and showed recovery of some of the function that they were seeing deficits in. So even without any treatment, yes, some of this, your brain, as Dr. Eisenberg said, models a new normal. And you will feel more normal again, or normal, as I like to say. How does HRT play into this? Well, short term, it can improve a lot of those symptoms. So short term, by balancing or stabilizing hormone in the brain, we can see an improvement in some mood symptoms. We absolutely can see an improvement in sleep symptoms, especially if sleep is being disturbed primarily by night sweats or hot flashes at night. And we can see some improvement in cognitive function. The debate really centers around long-term, is hormone replacement therapy preventative for things like Alzheimer's, dementia, or dementia? And the problem with asking that question is there are so many factors that go into it. There's so many dietary factors and lifestyle factors and medical factors that one intervention, it's hard to show that one intervention solves everything. So some studies show a benefit from hormone in the brain and long-term use of hormone in terms of Alzheimer's, dementia. And some studies show deficit. A lot of that is based on how those studies were designed, when women started on hormone, how long did they take it, what were their other risk factors. And so it can be a really challenging area of research to interpret. I think those of us who work in this area do feel like for many women, hormone can be somewhat protective and probably does have a protective effect. That being said, it's an individualized decision, because for other women, it's not protective and actually probably riskier. So that's one of those things you talk about with your physician and say, hey, in my particular case, what are the things I need to do, and can hormone play a role in protection?
Great. So, so I'm sitting here thinking, so how do I learn about HRT? Like, is that something that we'd see you, Dr. Dunsmoor-Su?
Absolutely. I love
Okay.
to talk about HRT. I do it all day long. I love to talk about studies. I'll sit down with you and talk about, okay, well, this study tells us this, and this study tells us that, and this is how this one applies to you, and this one doesn't. Things like that. As medicine has become more and more complicated, each individual counseling session becomes more and more complicated. I mean, it's not like we just have one answer fits all anymore. One answer can be very different for different people.
Right. Thank you so much. So Dr. Eisenberg, I'm going to ask this question, and it's probably a 2-hour answer, but if you can figure out how to answer it in a concise, short version, so what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and can either be cured? Because I know we've been talking about it. So I always like to level set. So if you can help us understand that.
Thank you. So Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. And it is a neurodegenerative disease. And as I said, it accumulates over time. So it has a very slow progression. Dementia, the definition of this simply means loss of cognitive function in 2 or more domains, which has an impact on your ability to function in the day-to-day. So for example, you might have memory loss and trouble booking and planning a trip, or you may not find your car, and this, you can't pay your bills and those types of things. So dementia is a very broad category of this progressive loss of ability to function independently in the world that is caused by cognitive impairments in, as I said, 2 or more domains. So, and most people have a mixed kind of dementia with a cardiovascular component. We know what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So that's the definition, Alzheimer's disease being the most common of this broader term of dementia.
Thank you. I didn't know that, so that's great. And then, so the follow-up question is, can either be cured?
Yes, and in terms of cure, there's primary prevention, there's secondary prevention. Some things can mimic dementia. So for example, if somebody came and had untreated sleep apnea or was on polypharmacy with harmful medications, like they were taking loads of Tylenol PM and Ambien and other medications that can cloud thinking, then it could look potentially like dementia. But then by targeting these risk factors or actually mitigating the harm in this instance and treating untreated sleep apnea, for example, then you may see improvement. Also, cognitive reserve, the level of education that somebody has and the level of engagement that somebody is, socially and cognitively, can be health promoting. So 40% of cases are preventable. There's a preclinical phase called mild cognitive impairment, where people have some cognitive issues, but they're functioning very well in the world. And actually, this is data from Ron Peterson, who actually coined the term long ago. In those folks, if you follow them, many of them will revert to normal. So fewer than 6 out of 100 on average per year progress to dementia in that prodromal mild cognitive phase. Once you have, mild to moderate dementia and you've excluded all these other treatable causes, you may not be able to cure it. However, and this is very important to underscore, people can live well with their dementia. And with proper access to programs and services and a strengths-based approach, people can really live well.
Great. Thank you very much. So, Dr. Zantop, how does mental health play into cognitive changes? And when is it time to see a psychiatrist or a therapist for evaluation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, we know that estrogen or changes in estrogen can cause cognitive issues, but so can a lot of other things. And as a psychiatrist, one of the main things that we see changing cognition is stress and depression. And so screening for depression, I think, is really, really important because in treating depression, people's cognitive ability gets better. So depression is really, depression is associated with lack of sleep, which can alter cognition. It's associated with just increased stress generally, which can alter cognition. And so in terms of kind of the psychiatrist's role, one thing that I know that Dr. Eisenberg talked about, and also Dr. Dunsmoor-Su, it's doctors tend to kind of function in silos, right? And so you have a patient going to see their OB-GYN and possibly a neurologist and a psychiatrist, and everybody, we're all kind of working towards a common cause. But what they found is that if you have a team working together, outcomes are obviously much better, and you're addressing issues from a lot of different perspectives. So I would say, as a psychiatrist, I would address cognition in terms of, stress reduction and reduction of depression and anxiety. And what's interesting is the SSRIs like Prozac or Zoloft, Celexa, Lexapro that we use have been found to decrease not only depression and anxiety, but also some of the other symptoms that come with perimenopause. So the vasomotor symptoms, for example, the hot flashes. And then what Dr. Eisenberg was saying, I think psychiatrists can be very helpful in terms of kind of identifying, if someone has depression and then referring them to therapy, for example, which is also a great way of treating depression, talking about different medications, talking about stress reduction, and then talking about diet, which is also very important, and exercise, which has an effect not only on cognition, but on general well-being and depression and anxiety. So I think working together is really, really important. And then, the one other role that I think a psychiatrist has is, two other roles. One is to identify medications that can worsen cognition, because there are medications for sleep and for depression that can actually make cognition a lot worse. And so figuring out if the medications are actually causing more harm than are helping. And then I think another really important part to all of this is that, we know, for example, we know so much about puberty, and we know so much more now about perinatal wellness and mental health issues, but menopause is something that's still not talked about very much. They don't, make movies about it. It's not something that's out in the open like other things. And so I think there's a lot of isolation, and what comes with that is always shame or feeling like you're alone. And so I think what psychiatrists can do as well as other physicians is really, do a lot of psychoeducation, encourage people to talk to each other, just let women talk about their experience, I think is huge. And let them feel like they're not alone, and really attending to what their experience is. Because I think very often women feel like, they tell their physician something and physicians don't have enough time, or they don't really know what's going on, and they feel very invalidated or dismissed. And so I think that's a big component of it too, is just being able to tell your story, talk about your experience, and then have someone who can sit down and kind of sort it all out and figure out, oh, you should really go see Dr. Dunsmoor-Su for hormone therapy, or, this is really, you should see a neurologist or someone who can help with nutrition or with sleep, or, those kinds of things.
Great. So if if women have mental health challenges or challenges around the transition to menopause, Dr. Zantop, is this permanent? Will I be dealing with this for the rest of my life, or in terms of mental health changes?
That is such a good question. And my sense is, a lot of women have mood or anxiety symptoms that kind of wax and wane throughout their lifespan, and they will likely have further episodes. There are women who really have more severe or marked or even clinical episodes during times of hormonal changes. And in the perinatal kind of postpartum period, we see women get significantly better. It takes a while. And I think, like Dr. Eisenberg was saying, the brain kind of, a lot of things change during pregnancy in a woman's brain, and then the brain kind of re-equilibrates to a certain extent. And I think the same thing happens with this transition. And so I think things definitely get better. And I think with attention to all these other things like, sleep and diet and stress reduction, and that sets women up for much lower risk of mood or anxiety symptoms in the future as well. I'm extraordinarily optimistic. I think, I see a lot of women get better with good treatment.
Well, I love that answer. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, Dr. Eisenberg, you are the medical director for the Center for Healthy Aging at Swedish. And I think it would be helpful if you could touch on the 7 habits of healthy aging. I know it's a pillar of your practice, and I find it really helpful, understanding this. So I'd love for you if you could touch on that for us.
Thank you. I would be happy to. And I think that many of them have been touched upon by Dr. Zantop and Dr. Dunsmoor-Su. And so I will echo some of those comments as well. I just want to begin by saying that in healthcare, I think we have to really broaden our thinking about well-being and health span to kind of consider our physical, our mental, our emotional, and our spiritual health. And the discoveries in modern medical science, neuroscience, and biobehavioral science have helped us to better understand how our well-being is really embodied, and that it's intertwined in all our organ systems, including our brain mind, same organ, right? So the first pillar of healthy aging is to intentionally cultivate a positive outlook which promotes plasticity in our brains, and it's neuroprotective. And Dr. Zantop pointed towards, some cultural toxicities around ageism and diet culture, and how women are devalued or not seen, where their concerns are dismissed. And this is real. And so as part of the team, we want to support you, and also to see the importance of kind of a positive appraisal that can really help us to thrive. And there was a recent study at Yale by Becca Levy and her group looking at 4,000 people over 4 years that demonstrated that people have positive attitudes about aging. Not only that they're going to live, they don't only live longer, but their risk of dementia is significantly reduced. So that may be that it confers wisdom, or I could be with my grandparents. And there are practices and skills that we can incorporate and teach that can really benefit, such as a gratitude practice or a sense of awe. So really cultivating intentionally a positive outlook, and this can help with stress management or stress resilience as well. So that's very important. The second pillar is really around healthy food. And we have to be careful because there is this kind of diet stigma challenge, and especially with the holidays. So the data is around a Mediterranean low salt diet. But let's have an 80-20 rule, and let's be understanding and supportive when we have a delicious treat over the holidays. But people who, this was another study for over 5 years, people between the ages of 50 and 80, and those who adhered to the Mediterranean and low salt diet cut their risk of Alzheimer's disease by more than half. So food is medicine, mindfulness is medicine, movement is medicine. So the third pillar is really exercise, and there's loads of data, and we've spoken about exercise earlier, not just aerobic exercise, but also strength training, particularly in women because of our risk of sarcopenia. So we want to do strength training a couple times a week, and that can be a plank. It doesn't have to be like weights. But the other thing that was recently discovered is that there's a wonderful myokine, which is a growth hormone for the brain that helps combat neuroinflammation and promotes neurogenesis. And that's called irisin. And irisin is secreted from the muscle when you build muscle or do strength training, comes to the brain and is neuroprotective in the same way that brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is also released when you have aerobic exercise, is a growth factor for the brain that helps the cells in the hippocampus to grow. That's called hippocampal neurogenesis. It helps connections in the brain, so the systems in the brain can talk to one another and communicate complex information more effectively. And it also builds blood vessels or angiogenesis, so you can bring up all the blood and other nutrients to the brain that are needed. Okay, the fourth, and we've spoken a lot about sleep, and this is a big symptom in the menopause transition. So restful sleep is key, not only to consolidate memory and to restore health, but also because we clear out the protein aggregates that can accumulate in neurodegeneration that are implicated in the neuropathogenesis of a variety of neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's disease. So restful sleep on average greater than 7 hours a night is elemental for your health and well-being. And we also have, we kind of process emotions and problem solve during REM sleep as well. So it has many, myriad functions. Sleep is so key. The fifth is really the social connection. We're social beings. Innately, we crave social contact. It's a shame that during the pandemic, we talked about social distancing. It should really have been physical distancing with social connection, retaining that connection, because we know that loneliness is really lethal and connection is so healing. And we also learn really well within a social milieu. And these kinds of group visits that Dr. Zantop does to support women in postpartum depression and has seen such great recoveries over time, and the type of brain health visits that we're doing, to see that group support And also to sustain behavior change, the kind of accountability that can emerge as well, and that sense of self-efficacy is really powerful. The sixth is sort of lifelong learning. And again, in community, how do you learn new things? It can strengthen concentration, capacity to be aware. And the seventh is limiting harmful substances, which was mentioned earlier, but also limiting harmful practices, such as self-criticism or negative self-talk, which can really be so toxic. And by cultivating these habits of healthy aging, we can really harness the neuroplasticity instead of being hijacked by distractions and these old and negative habit patterns.
I love it all. That's wonderful. So I'm thinking we need to send out to the group, and we will make sure to send this out. Everything that Dr. Eisenberg just covered around the 7 habits of healthy aging. So thank you so much. I just was sort of mentally kind of thinking through every single habit that you were describing and thinking how I could incorporate that. So we've got all 3 of you here. Dr. Dunsmoor-Su, can you talk about just how we all can work together and the partnerships that we're doing at Swedish, both with Dr. Zantop's work and Dr. Eisenberg around brain health?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of, I don't know, most people on this panel don't know this, but I'm actually in the midst of interviewing people for residency positions at Swedish right now. And one of the things I was asked me is, what is the most important thing about being at Swedish to you? And I always say it's the collegiality of the people I work with. I have never had anyone, when I approach them and say, hey, I'm opening this new women's wellness clinic, do you want to collaborate? I've never had anyone say no. Everybody wants to work together. And so, there's so many things that we're building that I can't go through them all, but let me focus on what we're building with Dr. Eisenberg and Dr. Zantop today. So for example, in the new women's wellness and GYN specialty services space, we thought it was very important that different specialties work together in a space, because then not only do we have that easy referral pattern, but we actually have that, hey, walk down the hall and Dr. Zantop's there in my office and I can ask her, hey, I have this patient with this issue. What do you think? We can actually have that informal collaboration as well as the formal collaboration, but it also gives us a chance to be brainstorming and building programs together. It's an amazing thing. So for example, Dr. Zantop's going to be working in our clinic 1 day a week and seeing patients there as a psychiatrist, but also working as part of our overall general care team. Dr. Eisenberg and we are building this, she talked about the home program, how do we build these educational components that'll happen in her clinic, but also happen in ours, so that whenever you're in this sort of women's wellness space, it can be a different kind of home for you. And we have all these different services to do together. All of this is because we have amazing donors, Lorna, because we have the funding to build these unique and different programs, which, in medicine, that's sometimes hard to do because, insurance companies don't pay you to innovate. And so that's where the foundation has really been key for all of us, I think.
Well, this is very exciting. I have had the honor and pleasure of working with each of you and getting this off the ground. So I feel like this is just the beginning of a really amazing thing for all of our patients. Well, thank you so much. We have some great questions that I would love to start going through, and then feel free to, I'll pepper the questions, and then whoever would like to go, please go. So the first question is, which lab test do you suggest for one to confirm menopause?
I think that one's for me. And the answer is no lab test. And the reason being is that menopause is defined by 12 months without a period. Now, sometimes women don't have a uterus or have an IUD or some other reason like that. And then it can be a little bit harder to tell where they are. But one of the things we know about perimenopause, which is that transitional time when periods are irregular, is that hormone tests are also irregular during that entire time. So 1 month you may look menopausal and 1 month you may look reproductive, and everywhere in between shows up on a lab test. It doesn't help us. It also doesn't entirely matter exactly where you are in that transition. If you're symptomatic, we should be talking to you about how do we treat you and make you feel better. So it doesn't matter if you're 6, 9, 12 months from that last period. If you are not feeling well, we need to help you.
Great. Thank you. Is there a correlation between decrease in estrogen in your system and vertigo?
I'll start, but I'm going to throw that one to Dr. Eisenberg as well. The answer is yes, I see this. We do see vertigo pick up around the perimenopausal transition, and whether it's a direct estrogen effect or not, I'm not sure if we're 100% sure. Although I always do go back and talk to my patients about the fact that estrogen is an anti-inflammatory. So it that may be somewhat of the impact at the inner ear. But Dr. Eisenberg, your insights might be very helpful here.
No, I appreciate what you said, Dr. Dunsmoor-Su. And, vertigo, I encounter vertigo not infrequently. It's not a rare symptom. So, and can be due to a number of things, including dehydration or a little inner ear as infection or inflammation. So while there may be an association, it can also be caused by a number of other factors.
Great, thank you. Dr. Dunsmoor-Su, I think this one's for you. Are there any hormonal changes to be aware of after menopause?
That's actually a really good question, because I think we think of the menopausal transition as the big hormonal change. And in many ways it is. The perimenopause hormones are sort of all over the place. And by hormones, I mean estrogen and progesterone. And they sort of go all over the place. And then after menopause, they tend to go low and stay pretty low. Now, you still make some estrogen from the adrenals and from your fat cells. And then the third hormone that we don't tend to talk about a lot, but is an interest area of mine, is testosterone. Women make testosterone continuously through their menopausal transition. It does not drop. So testosterone is on a very slow decline throughout our lives. That doesn't alter with the menopausal transition. It just continues normally. And that's true for men and women. So are there still hormonal changes happening? Slight ones, yes. But the big transitional time is that menopausal change when everything goes from sort of high to low.
Great, thank you. Okay, I like this one. Sleep, OMG, yes. What can we do to improve our sleep? Any suggestions that we haven't heard a million times before? Who wants to take that?
I'm going to suggest Veronica take it and talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, because I know that's what I talk about a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sleep is an issue that we deal with all the time, and it's complicated. I mean, there are a lot of medications we can use for sleep, and we talk to people about the whole range of medications for sleep. We talk to new moms about sleep training their babies a lot. And I think you can sleep train yourself as an adult too. I mean, there's a lot known about what promotes good sleep. It's hard to sometimes I would say be diligent and kind of rigorous enough to continue to maintain those sleep hygiene measures, so for example, getting up at the same time every morning, going to bed when you're really tired, not before then, not trying to catch up on sleep, but, not using screens in bed, which I think as a physician, a lot, and you're not necessarily practicing it in your everyday life all the time, which you should be, but, screens, caffeine. And then there is a branch of cognitive behavioral therapy, which focuses on insomnia, which is very effective. And so you can use cognitive techniques to help you get to sleep. I also have a lot of patients who use apps like Calm, and you can do a progressive muscle relaxation, or you can do a breathing exercise, or there's bedtime stories. There's one with Matthew McConaughey. I don't know, some people love his voice, puts them to sleep anyway, so there's a lot of different options. So also what you eat before bed, the temperature of your room, how dark your room is, you can modify to get to sleep. And so I think all of those are really important to talk about. And I think also with every patient, as individual, and they have different habits and different issues with sleep, so some people can't fall asleep, and some people wake up multiple times at night, and some people wake up really early. And so figuring out what the sleep pattern is and what might be contributing to poor sleep.
One thing I tell all of my patients is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia actually has a free app. It's CBTI Coach. It was developed by the VA for veterans with PTSD, so everybody can have it for free. So it's a great place to start if you just want to sort of understand how it works. It's not the most elegant app, but it is a good functional one. And the other thing I always remind women who come into my clinic is that along with menopause, sleep apnea does pick up. So we lose muscle strength in our neck and our throat. So certainly if your partner is mentioning snoring or stopping breathing and things like that, it is worth having a sleep evaluation to make sure that you are not actually having apnea. You don't necessarily have to be, we tend to think of sleep apnea as heavy women or, people with a thick neck. Anyone can have sleep apnea.
Great point. Great point. Thank you for pointing that out. The questions that we have about the development of different programs, we can provide information. Somebody's asking about the development of home, Dr. Eisenberg. We're running short on time, so I will say that we will follow up with you. And then which doctor at this clinic would a woman begin if they are having anxiety and depression? Dr. Zantop, it sounds like, you would be I think the natural first step for her. And then the last question is, what can be done for those of us who cannot take hormones? Past hormone-related cancer, so not allowed any hormones.
So I get that question a lot. And actually one of the funniest things about my being a menopause specialist is that I've talked to a lot of women who can't have hormones, but who are struggling. And the answers, you've heard them all today. A lot of it is centered around lifestyle and interventions that we can make to make your lifestyle be the medicine that you can't take. It's whether that be dietary change or exercise changes or changes in how you sleep or how you approach sleep, those can have huge impacts on how you feel overall. And certainly if those are not enough, we do have other medications that are not hormones that can manage symptoms. So we have the SSRIs that Dr. Zantop spoke about. Sometimes we use things like gabapentin at night for sleep. Sometimes we use old blood pressure medications for hot flashes at night. So there are other things that we can do and certainly are happy to talk about and have expertise in.
Thank you so much. Well, I think after every virtual event, I always comment on it's already time and I wish that we had a lot more time. So I just want to encourage everybody to once we send you this recording, to save it, refer to it, and take notes if you'd like. We will be sending this out. I'd like to thank Dr. Dunsmoor-Su, Dr. Eisenberg, and Dr. Zantop for joining us today. We'd also like to thank our donor who recently committed a significant gift, who is making this work possible. She wants to inspire and help women in our community. After this call ends, a brief survey will be displayed. If you have time, please let us know any feedback or additional questions that you have. We can try and answer them. And if you have questions about the program and supporting, of course, I'm always happy to have that conversation with you. I believe my information is now showing. We appreciate, again, all the donors who help make events like this possible. Swedish is here to help women just like you, and we are ready to do so. So I wish you all a great rest of your day, and thank you again for joining us.